Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and if you're going onto the web archive, the internet archive, you know the place where we use to access a lot of classic stuff. I've used it to access old websites years ago on series like nostalgic web browsing. If you ever were a year one Some Ordinary Gamers viewer. I've used the Internet Archive to look through plenty of internet ARGs, uncover some rather, wild things from certain, shady, controversial influencers, and what I consider to be really important is preserving, older software. Software like Silent Hill Exotica on the actual original Xbox. Yeah, this one mod that was once considered lost media in the topic of creepypastas is actually recovered and stored on the Internet Archive. I wish I could show you that page right now, but unfortunately the Internet Archive is completely taken down. Yes, there's a bunch of hackers out there that have tried to actually ruin a piece of internet history. So late last night, one thing that I had spotted, and I'm sure many of you, if you were using the Internet Archive, something on their actual banner started to say, have you ever felt like the Internet Archive runs on sticks and is constantly on the verge of suffering a catastrophic security breach? It just happened. See 31 million of you on HIBP. So what HIBP is Have I Been Pwned? Now, Have I Been Pwned is a website run by security researcher Troy Hunt, and of course, this actually allows you to put in your email address and see if it has been part of data breaches. So you know how websites do dark web monitoring, where they go into the deep recesses of dark web hacker forums and try to look through tables and identify if people have been hacked, if your information is being sold, or if you're probably just being traded on a hacker forum that exists right now. Yeah, this is something where there's plenty of data breaches that happen almost every single day. For instance, just looking at the data breaches right now, Central Tickets, 722,000 accounts hacked there. Butt Trader accounts, 2.7 million accounts. Actually, I want to know what Butt Traders is. It's a social platform for sale. Oh, wait. The data breach of a defunct cannabis social media. Dude, there's an app for everything. But of course, importantly, 31 million accounts that belong to the Internet Archive have been revealed. Now, we'll get to this in a little bit. See, there's actually two hacking groups we're looking at today. The one we're going to be focusing on is the one that's actually taking the battle right now. So if you try accessing the Internet Archive, clearly it's inaccessible. So I decided to go onto the internet and see who claimed that they took this down. And it led me to an actual group known as SN Black Meta. We can see everything. Hashtag dark meta, hashtag black meta, hashtag dark unity, Telegram channel, blah, blah, blah. Now, again, I don't have to remind my audience, you probably shouldn't be clicking on any of these. Don't go to any of their pages or Telegram links. If I do go to them during this video, it's because I'm a trained monkey that knows what I'm doing, at least in this scenario. So if you look at their actual location, it's written in, again, Cyrillic. So if I just try to translate it, Staraya Russa, a town in Russia. All right, if you actually look very carefully into this town, it seems pretty nice. And it's close to St. Petersburg right over there. Okay, so interesting enough. Not really a focal point. They actually released this video 5 hours ago where they showcased this cringe video. And mind you, this will actually hurt. So put on some protective gear before we jump into this hellish landscape.
Если несправедливость стала законом, то пусть восстание станет долгом. 28 мая мы начали международную...
Oh no, we've launched an international attack on the world's largest archive. So this is back from apparently May 28th is when the actual thing claimed. So if I actually look into it real carefully, starting on May 28th, we launched an international attack. And of course they claim full responsibility, the press published it, they got their actual reason. So if you ask them what their reasoning for it is, they mention... So they actually mentioned that they're the Black Meta group, and since the beginning of the war in Gaza, we have declared ourselves the voices of freedom. So I'm going to cut it right over here because they start showing some actual footage of, the atrocities that are going on in Gaza right now, the strip. So obviously, per YouTube's TOS, I'm not showing it to you, and I'm sure you've probably already seen it, as it's most likely been in a lot of people's feeds because it's been a pretty, heavy topic for the last year. So immediately, this is a hacktivist group, and DDoSing, I'm just going to start off by saying, is nothing massively serious. These people decided not to target the United States government, most likely, I think, out of fear and ineptitude, because targeting a government installation is a lot more difficult, and if they were really getting into the way to the US government, there's nothing that stops a few 5.56 rounds going into the heads of a few hackers, right? If push comes to shove. So clearly they targeted the Internet Archive because obviously they didn't have the resources of the US government. But that's not according to what these dipshits are saying. So when they were asked about this, the Internet Archive has and is suffering from a devastating attack. We've been launching several highly successful attacks for 5 long hours, and to this moment, all their systems are completely down. So they start linking to checkhost.net, which I've pulled up in a quick little virtual machine to show you exactly what they're exactly pointing at here. And if you look at this website real quick, you can see that the archive.org, a lot of their actual hosts have been shut down. So from various locations that they've been hitting at, connections are timing out. So obviously we're unable to connect to the Internet Archive at the moment. I want to remind you that taking down the Internet Archive is kind of like shooting a medic in a fucking battlefield. Who does that? Except these idiots. So when somebody asked, okay, why would you do that? Why? They're under attack because the archive belongs to the USA, which is patently false. The Internet Archive is not owned by a country, okay? It is a non-profit entity. And as we all know, this horrendous and hypocritical government supports the genocide that is being carried out by the terrorist state of Israel. So that's literally what they're going at with, okay? Now again, here's the thing. There's a way to protest atrocities, and I'm just going to keep it $1.50. I'm going to talk about this for literally just a minute, okay? If you are protesting and trying to raise awareness, this is by far the way to piss people off, okay? The Internet Archive is a truly innocent group in regard to just preserving a massive piece of human history, the internet. Now, aside from the Internet Archive, there really isn't anybody else doing this. So because we've lost the Internet Archive today, the people who used it nonchalantly, thinking that it was a resource that never really was going to go away, are now waking up to the realization that within a fraction of a second, all of human history's preservation, at least when it comes to the internet, is kind of up in the air. So we really do have to take care of this. Now, the Internet Archive's been going through a lot of shit in regards to lawsuits where, admittedly, they have hurt themselves a lot by distributing, freely accessible resources. They're in a lawsuit with multiple different book companies, I believe Sony Media, tons of organizations, and I've covered this in the past. Now, this situation is just the extra cherry on top for a lot of, issues that they're going to be going through. Now, when it comes to the idea of protest, obviously, look, I'm just going to keep it, again, I'm going to talk about this just for like a minute, specifically this instance. There is a massive, war that is going on in Gaza right now. There is a massive, serious conflict. There are actual children, women, men that are dying at the hands of, that are dying in between two entities, okay? Now, obviously, if you go onto the internet and see a discussion, you'll probably find that people on the internet are now defending a actual sanctioned terrorist group known as Hamas that is currently hiding behind innocent individuals in the name of resistance to fight back against Israel, right? Against an occupation. Now, obviously, there is serious atrocities being committed by this actual designated fucking terrorist group. And of course, one can also criticize the Israeli government for an overhanded defense and, ultimately hurting and costing human lives in the process, innocent human lives. Now, in this entire discussion, I have seen people on the internet defend this sanctioned terror group Hamas, but obviously criticizing Israel. People are obviously saying, why would you do that? People bring up anti-Semitism when you try to criticize an Israeli government. I think a government should be criticized. Israel, which is pretty large, pretty wealthy, I think anybody can be criticized. That's why I try to have a nuanced take on the situation, and I think that my viewers should too. If you're somebody that literally engages in politics as a team sport, you are, without a doubt, one of the biggest cancers to exist in human history, I would say. And honestly, this topic, this conflict, is such a massive conflict with decades of history that I would urge, if you are interested in understanding, the conflict as a whole, research it for yourself. And that's where I'm going to leave it at. This organization running this cringe attack, it does nothing to assist anybody to have pro-Palestinian sentiments. If anything, all this does is piss people off. And their actual attack is completely misguided. They're targeting a non-profit organization with no affiliation to the United States or really Israel in general. They're just targeting a group that is preserving human history. And by that means the only group preserving the internet for human history, which I think is really important as somebody that considers themselves a preservationist. So literally, they are openly saying, we've decided to take down all your online services and resources. That includes millions of PDF files, footage, saved website history, and on top of that, completely disabling any users from accessing your files. Now, I think this ultimately harms them as well, too, because if you really think about it, if there is evidence, that is stored on the Internet Archive that highlights IDF controversies, IDF, war atrocities, which there there are, they have basically taken down the only source of evidence that you can just grab, literally in this shit protest that they're doing, right? So again, they're only hurting themselves royally in this fucking process, and the people they're trying to defend. So again, this is just a DDoS attack, which if you ever watched me talk about DDoSs, in virus investigations or any cybersecurity video that I do, DDoS attacks are not difficult to do. And obviously it's something that is literally trying to be fended off at the moment in real time by the Internet Archive. So Brewster Calle says, what we know, DDoS attack fended off for now. Obviously this was posted late last night. There's still a there's a second DDoS attack that's unfortunately happening. Then the defacement of their website via the JS library, so that initial JavaScript pop-up I showed you in the beginning. And then, of course, a breach of usernames, emails, salted encrypted passwords. And then what they've done is they've disabled that JavaScript library, the scrubbing systems, they're working on that, and of course, upgrading their security. And of course, they've also mentioned that literally their archive and open library is offline at the moment. So yeah, it's not good. It's definitely terrible for the Internet Archive today, and I think a lot of people that use it casually are feeling the fucking pain. Now, looking at the actual second group that apparently has actually hacked the passwords, this is where the real interesting side comes out into. Now, if you go back to Have I Been Pwned, those 31 million Internet Archive breaches ended up being announced and coming out sometime around the end of September of last month. Now, according to Troy Hunt, who told a publication known as Bleeping Computer that eventually, at one point, 9 days ago from the time of them posting this actual archive over here, they had shared a file known as ia_users.sql. And this was a 6.4 gigabyte SQL file that contained authentication numbers, email addresses, screen names, and passwords that were, encased in bcrypt. Now, one of the first things you want to do is verify if anything is legitimate. And the way that Troy did was he ended up looking up a fellow researcher, Scott Helm, and he dug out their information from this. Now, obviously, Scott has an account on the Internet Archive, as do I, as do plenty of people. 31 million to be exact. What Troy did was he contacted Scott. Scott had verified that, yes, the hash did make sense. Now, I've covered password salting in previous videos of mine, virus investigations, really any cybersecurity video. But the way that passwords work is that typically when you enter in a password, like this, for instance, password 123, it is then hashed. And this hash is something that is calculated in SHA 256. So what a salt does is it effectively adds appends an extra string to each password. So salts can be completely randomized. So according to this table over here, user 1 and 2 have entered the same password. So password 123 and password 123. What the salt has done is added an extra string of randomized characters to that entire, string of passwords. And then, of course, the hashes that are now calculated again in SHA 256 are two different numbers as opposed to the same number before the salting was added. So that's kind of a general understanding of what I'm saying here. What was actually determined in this actual SQL file was that the passwords were salted in what is known as bcrypt. And bcrypt is relatively strong, okay? You're going to be fine when it comes with your passwords being hashed. Now, if a password was put into something like plain text, where literally your password was stored in a text file that you could open up and literally not have to decrypt in any capacity, that would be bad. But a bcrypt hash file means that your passwords were stored with encryption applied to it, meaning that you're still going to be relatively okay, provided your password was complex and your password wasn't something easy like password 123, which easily would be part of many word list files and be used in an attack that can, that can decrypt these files and link you to your actual hacked password. And if you reuse that password, password 123 across multiple sites with the same email, that's something that you need to worry about. Now I can talk about password hashes all the time, but to show you something right over here, I basically made a hash file in MD5. So these are 3 MD5 hashes, right? And again, this is not so much salting, these are just encrypted in MD5. So without basically, throwing you into the weeds here real quick, I'm gonna basically make 3 passwords here in what is known as MD5. So this password hash is 123456, right? Just 6 digits, that's it. And of course, this is the password known as password in all lowercase. And this hash is the words hello in all capitals. Now, what this file that you're seeing over here, rocku.txt, if I can open up the properties, is a word list that is about 133 megabytes large. Now, I'm not going to open this up because it's going to crash the virtual machine, but what I can show you is obviously running a program known as Hashcat that can basically calculate those hashes against this word list. It has basically cracked these passwords in a matter of just 1 second, and it has identified those hashes as 123456, password, and hello. Now, obviously, this is a very, very weak hash file that I've just made for an example purpose. What bcrypt will do is it will protect you relatively well. In fact, if you look at this table of actual cracking going on, for bcrypt hashed passwords, if you're literally using 6 digits, but they're all numbers, right, your password will be cracked instantaneously. However, if you're literally working with the same amount of characters, but you have lowercase like words, 7 minutes. And of course, if it's just 6 characters with numbers, upper, lower, and symbols, then you're looking at about a crack time of 11.5 days. Now, it's one of the reasons why, if you're worried about your passwords, this is the best time to remind you to use a password manager, okay? Password managers where you can create 20-digit characters that contain numbers, uppers, lowers, and symbols will immediately jump that 11.5 days all the way up to 1.5449919 quadrillion years. Meaning that if your password is reasonably safe and you're worried about being cracked and you've used a password manager, there's a good chance that you would win the lottery before this scumbag who's cracking your passwords will have cracked your password during your natural lifespan. I'm not even joking. So again, I'm not trying to make this a password learning guide right here, a password history, a password cracking tutorial. That wouldn't be okay with YouTube's terms of services, but I am teaching you just kind of how this stuff works. Use a password manager, and if you have unfortunately used common passwords like password123, or password, or I love you, or 123456789, then please consider switching up your passwords. Please consider using a password manager, or just learn to use longer passwords that you can remember if you don't want to use a password manager for whatever reason, right? That's generally what I can say. I think in regards to this protest, one quote from the novel 1984 hits me. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. I really think that if there is some level of government influence on this, trying to take this down for, again, the war that is happening in Palestine and Israel and Gaza at the moment, you know, removing any evidence that could have existed of Hamas's atrocities or the IDF's atrocities through the Wayback Machine could ultimately, you know, lead, and again, I don't want to get conspiratorial over here, but taking this down would really benefit somebody who wanted to rewrite history. But going back out of the conspiracy here, I really think that taking down a bastion of human history right here, human preservation, is never a good sign. And while I think the Internet Archive absolutely will come back, I think this, alongside the copyright stuff, is really putting it into a dangerous situation. And that's where I really think that as the Internet Archive comes back, I think that security should be the focus. I think protecting themselves legally should be the focus. Because at the moment, not having the Internet Archive literally means we've lost the only form of internet human preservation that has ever actually existed. So yeah, nobody else is taking the advantage. We're losing the only people that are taking care of this, and that's not good. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am out.